Magnolia tincture from Magnolia bark. This is Magnolia liliflora, which is the one everyone grows, which has sort of pink tulip-like flowers. It flowers before the leaves come out. This is the best one to use. It comes from Asia. It has a really distinctive smell. And these grow all over, like, cities and in people's gardens, and it's really easy to find, and I'm not advocating theft exactly, but you can wildcraft it. So, what you do is you get your magnolia sticks and you peel them. Now if you leave them to dry a bit, sometimes you can do it by hand, but generally you're going to have to use a knife. And so you just whittle away at the wood and you take the whole of the top layer of bark off. And you can tell when you have because you get all the way through the green layer, and when you get through the green layer it's woody underneath. And small buds you can keep, bigger buds, flowers, leaves take off. You only want the bark. And second year growth is best. The woodier the better, because the more bark, because only the secondary growth makes the chemicals we want, which have a smell, which is sweet and fruity and vaguely like magnolia flowers, but a bit more vegetal. And it smells a bit like pine, very slightly, but mostly a sweet kind of floral smell. And the active chemicals are called magnolol and honokiol, and both of them show anti-tumor activity and are cardioprotective, like heart protective. They prevent arrhythmias, they're anti-anxiety, they increase the activity of GABA, so they'll make you sleepy if you have too much. They're muscle relaxants and they prevent tooth decay. And actually in Japan people make chewing gum that has magnolol and honokiol added to them. So you remove all of the bark, like this, and when you've finished, you will end up with a big bowl of bark, and this can be kind of time consuming. You don't have to do this at the same time. I did this last week and it's dried. If you buy it from a herbal medicine store, they'll sell it dried, so it doesn't matter whether it's dried out. So when you get a big bowl of bark, like that, and you've stripped all of that, you need to grind it. You can use a coffee grinder. It's best to use a special coffee grinder. If you use the one you use for coffee, it will end up smelling weird, and everything that you make with it will taste like some blend of all of the plants that you've ever tinctured. So you put it in here. You have to pack it kind of loosely. If you pack it too tightly, then it won't grind properly. The blade will stick and make this kind of horrible whirring sound, and you know what would happen. So you get it in, and you grind it till it's powdery. Now you don't want to leave it on for too long because it will heat up, and if it heats up the magnolol and honokiol start to degrade, and it smells good. So this is still not quite ground enough, so I'm going to put it in and carry on grinding it a little bit. You can also use North American species like Magnolia grandiflora, which is the one that grows all over the South. I don't think they're as good. You can tincture the flowers. I've actually tinctured magnolia flowers before, which are over here, in here. If you tincture the flowers, I don't think it's as medicinally active. I've tried and it hasn't done anything, but it really smells very strongly of magnolia flowers. So you may want to use that as like a perfume or something. If you put it on your skin. So the product of all of that bark stripping and grinding earlier is about half a jar full of bark powder, which smells really good. And now this was a product of all of the stuff that was already in the bowl, plus the stuff that I was stripping at the time I was making the last video. So it really reduces down a lot. It's like hardly anything. So you need to gather branches liberally. So what we do with this, you can use any alcohol. You want something that has a high alcohol concentration, as high as you can find. You can use vodka or something like that. Everclear is the best because it's 75% and you can always dilute it afterwards. Normally we dilute it so it's double the volume with water. And you need a mason jar. And so you just pour the Everclear on here. And you want to put slightly more alcohol than there is plant matter, so you get a little layer on top, which is called head space. I don't know why they call it head space, but herbalists call it head space. But anyway, I'm just going to use all of it because that was roughly the right amount. In California, you can only get 75% Everclear. In some other states, you can get 99% Everclear, but we can't get that here. If you can get it, it's better. It will suck things out of the plant better. And so you close it pretty tightly and shake it until it's completely mixed. And I'm actually going to have to put a little bit of water in here because just so it marinates better. So it's very important that you use grain alcohol or alcohol that's safe for drinking and says that it is on the bottle. You can't use isopropyl or rubbing alcohol or anything like that because you will actually poison yourself. And dilute it so it's not more than about 30%, because otherwise it will be horribly burny and you won't even be able to swallow one dropper full of it. So you leave this for at least a week. You can actually leave it longer, and if you want, you can just scoop little spoonfuls off and mix them with water and use them. After about 2 weeks, it will have extracted most of what's going to be extracted, and then you can strain it through a coffee filter. Usually do that twice and use double coffee filters so that when you push it through it doesn't break the filter and you don't get bits of bark going down. And when you've strained it and it's ready, you put it in bottles like this. You want to use brown glass because it protects it from light, so the glass is brown here so that the light doesn't come in and degrade the contents. And I found it's really, really good for anxiety. I mean, it's actually as good as a low-dose benzodiazepine. If you have enough of it, it is similar to a small amount of Ativan. And it's not addictive. And it's not because of the alcohol, because by enough of it I mean about 3 droppers, and there's not enough alcohol to get drunk off 3 droppers, if that's 30%. And you can make it yourself. We also, we make it and we sell it on our Etsy store, which is Palix, Tinctures and Salves. And we have a link to the Etsy site in our description box so you can find it there. It's been about a month, or it should have been about a month, but it's difficult to leave it because it's really good and then you end up just sort of sipping it off the top, or at least I have. So after a month or so it will have settled, and you can tell that it's extracted when the fluid has gone like a deep sort of brown color like that, and also when all of the bark sinks down to the bottom of the jar, and it doesn't look like bark in water, it looks like a sort of like the bottom of a pool or something. It might sound kind of unappetizing, but it's good. So you shake it to redistribute everything, because when you put it into the coffee filter you don't want all the small bits to be at the bottom, otherwise they form a kind of plug and you want everything to drain more easily. So you have another jar the same as the first jar, and you just take the top off here, and you can tell that this one's really concentrated because it actually started to precipitate, there's actual black Magnolia sort of oils on the sides, which will happen. If you shake it, that will redissolve before you open it. And you use just a coffee filter, works well. It's best to use 2 coffee filters, because if you use one, when you squeeze it out, which is the final step, it can come through and then all of your bark can dump back in your second jar and then you have to do it again. Whereas if you use 2 coffee filters, that won't happen. But one thing I usually do is I only put the second coffee filter on after it's already drained through. That way it drains through faster and then I can put the other one on before I squeeze it. And so you pour it through. And the top layer comes through easily, and then you need to get a spoon and spoon out the gloop. And the gloop moveth here. But I think it's okay, so do that. And then, obviously if you put all the gloop in there on top, it's all just going to go everywhere, so this takes a while. I got the ingredients also to make a skullcap, hops and tulsi tincture, which will be the next one that we're making. Sort of on the anxiety-reducing, anger management type stuff right now. Stuff is stressful, so it helps. So once the first lot has gone through, you can start spooning the bark in there. It's kind of interesting because you can see where we made a mistake and put wood in, because the bits that were wood have made these long fibers. And of course, bear in mind, displacement. Displacement is not your friend. If you put too much bark in, then it will all go everywhere because all of the water will come out the top. Not the water, but the alcohol. And do it in probably 2 batches. And you can sort of distribute it out, but you don't want to press it too hard with the spoon, because if you press it too hard it will go through the filter at the bottom. But you can sort of do it a little bit like that, just to get it to go a bit faster. Oh, and I have scratches on my arms, but that's not because I'm engaging in self-harm practices. I was working in my roof garden all day and I was weeding, and so things attacked. Mainly opuntias and various cacti. Yeah. So, sort of all scratched. Anyway. And even if I was engaging in self-harm practices, I think Magnolia would be good. It would be good for something like that, definitely. It's very calming. Oh, also I recently found out that Magnolia is actually an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, which I didn't know before. But it means it would help also with things like cognitive impairment if you have low acetylcholine levels. It's a reuptake inhibitor for the enzyme that degrades acetylcholine, which is all over your brain. And it does it better than the drugs that are used for that, because it also acts on GABA, and it's neuroprotective. Once all of the liquid has gone through, then you're going to have to squeeze it a bit to get the rest of it out. So you can just get the coffee filter out, and hopefully this isn't going to go everywhere. And you just gently squeeze around there without kind of squeezing too hard so it doesn't break up the bottom. You put it in another one, and then you can just, once that goes like that, and then down and over it up. And you'll make a bit of a mess maybe. Oh, and it hurts. I forgot I have wounds on my arms. Of course it hurts. This is 70% alcohol. Well, I guess it will sterilize them. So enduring the pain from your wounded fingers, you continue to squeeze, feel the pain as you squeeze, but release your pain somehow. And then, just get that up, just sort of wring it. That. So, when you've finished straining all of it through, you get the coffee filter and get the like drips out. And then you can dilute it. And you don't dilute it too much, because if you dilute it too much, there are 2 problems. Firstly, the alcohol acts as a preservative and sterilizes it, so if it's too dilute, then organisms will start growing in it and it won't stay good, it won't keep it. If you keep it with sufficient alcohol content, like above about 40%, it can last for years. And so right now it's 75%, so basically you just don't want it to be twice, you want it to be about like a third, maybe between a quarter and a third more. The only reason that you don't want the alcohol content to be really high is that when you put it in the dropper or put it in your mouth or however you consume it, it's just going to burn horribly. And so you just pour water in here, and you can use filtered water is fine, like those little cartridges where it goes through the carbon are good. That way you don't get things like lime in there, and you have more of a consistency with your tinctures. So some people worry about the alcohol content of tinctures because they think that they'll possibly get drunk off of the alcohol. But if you're using a dropper like this, if you measure out 3 to 4 like third full droppers, which is basically what most of the time you're going to be consuming, that's still going to be less than a tablespoon of 30% alcohol. And then if you put that into something like a shot glass, you would see how that's like less than a fifth of what would fill that. So it really isn't much of a concern unless you just go completely like whole wild with it and just start guzzling it down, which obviously if you drank the whole thing at once you'd get slightly drunk, but it's not a big problem. So anyway, once you put it in the mason jar, you tighten it and seal it like that, and it will last actually realistically a couple of years, because the alcohol completely is bactericidal and sterilizes everything. Eventually, depending on the plant, the components might start to degrade. I don't know specifically how long that takes with Magnolia, but like a year is a good guide. They all look the same, they're all sort of like brown liquid, really, so you want to make sure you label it, otherwise it gets really confusing, and because it's addictive making them, you end up making a bunch of different plants. So, you know, just get a normal label and just write Magnolia on it. Stick it on like that, so you know. So that's your sort of stock solution there. And then it's a good idea, you want to keep this in a dark place so the light doesn't degrade stuff. When you're actually going to be using it or carrying it around or something like that, and for Magnolia, a good guide, if you're using it, is probably about 3 times a day, about 3 droppers-ish. You want to put it in a jar that is brown like this to protect it from light. And you just use the red coffee filter. It's not to be red, I don't know why I'm saying red. But anyway, and you position it so that, you position the coffee filter so that there's little holes over there so it doesn't go everywhere and you don't get a sort of tincture volcano. And you pour it in slow, and just watch, bearing in mind that, it should be enough. Bearing in mind that when you put this in, it's going to displace some, and if it's too full, it will just sort of go everywhere. And there is that. And this also you'll want to label. With most tinctures, you want to put them under your tongue, because that way the mucous membranes in your mouth will absorb the constituents most efficiently. And the alcohol helps with that, because it actually opens the pores up in there and it goes in faster. And with Magnolia, with the anti-anxiety stuff, you'll probably actually notice it within like 5 to 10 minutes if you do it that way. So you just get this and you squirt it in. And just leave it there for a while and then sort of swallow it down. We also sell all of these tinctures on our Etsy shop, which is called Palix Tinctures and Salves, spelled P-A-L-E-X. We already have Magnolia, lemon balm, red clover, skullcap, hops, scaletium, and some other ones, and we're always adding more of them. Thank you for watching this video and happy tincturing.